Pollution from industrial discharge is causing the erosion of our shorelines. Pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, oil, sewage. We dump a lot of that stuff into the ocean where it's consumed by marine life and actually becomes part of the food chain. And it's kind of slowly poisoning undersea life.
We live in perilous times where there are so many different threats that bear down on us each and every day. But there is one that goes largely unnoticed because it's not square in our face. And the knee-jerk media does not deem it important enough to discuss at any length. We believe otherwise, that the human damage being done to the oceans and the animals living in them is worth your time. He's a professor at the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Biology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Douglas McCauley joins us today. Professor, thanks so much for joining us.
And thank you very much for having the discussion on the air today.
We have to, because the study that you and your colleagues put out, published in the journal Science, is absolutely frightening. When you look at your quote that says, we may be sitting on a precipice of a major extinction event. We're not trying to scare people, but dig into that a little bit. What do you mean by a major event, and how close are we?
Well, you captured it just right, is that we're sitting on the precipice of this major extinction event, which is, it's quite a difference. You know, if you ask a guy sitting on the edge of a cliff, does it matter if you're sitting on the edge or you're falling off the cliff? Of course it matters, right? So here's what we found is we went and we looked in the oceans to try to get a sense of how much extinction, how much damage have we caused in the seas. And the good news is that we haven't created a mass extinction event in the oceans yet. The bad news seems to be that there's a lot of different things about the way that we're using the oceans now that may be pushing us, this wind at our back as we're sitting on this cliff of extinction, pushing us toward a pretty unhappy future in terms of extinction in the seas.
When you talk about mass extinction, are we talking about specific animals in the seas, specific areas? What exactly would that entail?
Well, let me put extinction and rates of extinction into a little bit of perspective. So let's compare things to land, right? There have been very rapid rates of extinction for terrestrial animals, for land animals. In the past 500 years, we've seen 500 animal species go extinct on land. And as you say, we haven't paid the same kind of attention to the ocean, so it hasn't been clear what's going on in the seas. The past 500 years, only 15 marine animal extinctions. In the process of actually trying to add up these numbers, run these two comparisons side by side, land to sea, we also looked at, just as you said, who's at most risk. So some groups that seem to be at high risk are sea turtles. None of them have yet gone extinct, but they're certainly highly endangered, most of the sea turtle species. One interesting thing we saw is that animals that actually come up to land at some point during their life to breed, to lay eggs, those are really at risk. So sea turtles are in that category. Some marine mammals like seals are in that category, and seabirds certainly also are in that high-risk grouping.
Is it fair to say that a lot of that happens because we as human beings come into contact with them and we pretty much just treat them like a part of the scenery and not that they're very important whatsoever?
You hit the nail right on the head, and that's the issue, is that the oceans have been mostly a refuge for wildlife. They're actually some of the most wild ecosystems in the entire planet, right? And so whales and other marine life that spend their entire life in the oceans get a little bit of buffer from humans. It's just when you set your flipper or your fin onto land that you begin to get in trouble, because then you run into us and some of our activities, and that puts you in a higher risk category. But this wildness, as we talk about in this report in Science, this wildness seems to be eroding. So the ocean's truly one of the most wonderful wildernesses. You can jump off, I'm here in California, I can jump off into the water with a snorkel on. I can swim now in the presence of 500-pound fish and almost 500,000-pound whales. We haven't seen animals like that on land for thousands of years. So it's a really special opportunity for us to think about what kind of future do we want for the oceans? What kind of future do we want for ocean wilderness? Because there's still a lot of these species alive, swimming out there somewhere in the seas.
Here's the other side of the argument. You've heard it. I'm sure you have. People will say that part of it is climate change. Some will say, wait a minute, part of it is evolution. Part of it is Mother Nature, because things go extinct all the time and it's not our fault. So how can we hold mankind to such a high level of accountability here in this when there's other things that get involved?
It's a really good question. Well, it's a matter of looking at who is causing these changes and then also at rates of change. You're absolutely right. People who talk about the 6th mass extinction, that automatically suggests that there have been 5 mass extinctions, massive mass extinctions before this, before what we see happening on land now that people refer to as this massive mass extinction. Now, the difference is what is responsible. So in the case of wildlife, it's really quite clear on land and as well in the seas that we're focusing on impacts specifically that people have had, that marine industry have had, that fishing has had. You know, there are some background rates of extinction that happen quite naturally. Species come in, species go out of ecosystems. But we're focusing on this report, these 15 extinctions that I talk about are extinctions that happened directly as a result of hunting. The Caribbean monk seal is a species that we hunted until we lost the last one. The Stellar sea cow, another marine animal that went extinct, is one that we hunted out 200 years ago in the oceans. And it's very clear in the record which we're responsible for and which we're not responsible for. And I think we all feel some sort of personal responsibility that if we change the oceans, that if we change it at really rapid rates, that's something we should feel uncomfortable about and something we should think carefully about slowing down for the future.
Got about a minute or so left here. What then is one simple way to start this without putting a tremendous burden on people and then starting to get them going, wait a minute, you're changing my lifestyle here. This is not fair because I'm human. We're top of the food chain. I don't want to do this. So what's that at least one logical way to start?
Sure. Well, let me throw one thing out there, and that's choosing what you eat. When you go into a seafood restaurant, when you run out to Walmart or to the local supermarket to buy your fish, the funny thing about marine animals is that we actually sell at-risk, sometimes even endangered marine animals in our markets, right? I think nobody would really be excited about picking a bald eagle out of the poultry section and having it for dinner. It's the bald eagles of the sea that are turning up in some of our seafood sections. So if you use your smartphone, jump onto an app called Seafood Watch. All you have to do is plug in the name of that species. It'll tell you which of the fish are safe to eat. And the thing is, there are lots of really healthy species out there in the oceans, and those are the ones we should picking up for our dinner table. It'll help you navigate through that list and figure out who is okay and who are the bald eagles, as I say, of the ocean.
It's a great way to put it, versus the bald eagle and the rest. Again, I want to remind everybody that the journal Science is the one that carries this article. You and your folks put it together. It's brilliant. It's got so much in it. I really think that people should at least get a chance to read it and understand a little bit more how we can all live together. It can all be happy. So we just all got to work at it, that's all. Professor Douglas McCauley, thank you so much for joining us and spending the time.
A pleasure joining you. Thank you.
Take care. Here's a simple statement anyone will be able to understand. Sit longer, have a greater risk of death. We'll be right back.